Changes
Hands
angle
from
there,
Nathan,
nice,
big
nice
left
kick.
Here comes Jordan
Jordy come back with those hands again.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Combat Chat Podcast. It is an absolutely beautiful sunny Saturday here in Sydney. Just wrapped up training. Things really starting to kick off for the year. Fight news coming soon. So everything's moving. Everything's full speed ahead in the gym at the moment, which is what we like. Solo again from the bedroom studio today, but have another guest calling in from Torquay down in Victoria. Mr. Matt Williams, how are you?
I'm wonderful. And it's sunny down here too. I was actually thinking you're looking pretty fit and healthy. There must be something around the corner. And thanks for noticing that I'm looking pretty slender. I've probably just got worms.
You are looking very, very slender, very fit, and very handsome, of course. I thought it went without saying.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you.
And Matt, thanks very much for joining me this afternoon. For any listeners that don't recognize you, you are running the show there at Bones MMA in Torquay. If people know where Torquay is, people might recognize your voice. You've been doing a lot of the commentary for the big one, Rebellion Muaythai recently. When we have people on the show, how we like to kick off always is just if you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of your background, how you got into Muay Thai or martial arts in general, and how you came to be where you are today.
Yeah, sweet, man. So I'm originally from New Zealand. So I've been in Torquay for about 3 years. Before that, I was in Melbourne for about 10. Prior to that, I was in Auckland, and prior to that, I was in Bay of Plenty, Tauranga. So I originally got my start in martial arts in Auckland with a guy, Richie Hardcore.
Yep.
So some might remember him. He's he's fought in Australia. He's got a good little stable over there. Kickboxing and Muay Thai in New Zealand have very strong roots, especially in the 90s and early 2000s. It was a bit of a powerhouse, and I'm not sure that people realize how important it is to the culture of martial arts back there, and about the lineage that we have in Japan fighting over here. There's been from Shane Chopper Chapman to Ray Sefu. It's really prominent part of Auckland culture and sporting culture, and it's on TV. Free to air TV. We'll get the King of the Ring. I remember watching Dan Hooker fight at light heavyweight in a kickboxing tournament, way back in the day. Pretty crazy, man. And then to go to, get on the chickpeas or whatever he did to get down to featherweight. It's just crazy. So I originally got started with Richie and didn't spend too long there. I ended up making the move to Melbourne, and I was training with Tao a little bit out in Richmond, and then pursued a career, and that kind of took me away from martial arts, but fell back in love with it and started training at Renegade MMA, which is in Kensington. That's primarily a jiu-jitsu gym, but I was training with the likes of Cal Potter, UFC, now former UFC athlete, Jamie Murray, a fantastic jiu-jitsu instructor, and that was kind of the beginning of my own competitive journey, but also probably where I got my start coaching too. So I was given the opportunity to coach there, and coach alongside Cal and be in his corner. It was a really amazing part of my journey. And through Renegade, got my start in amateur, mixed martial arts and kickboxing and Muay Thai. When I made my professional debut, I severely damaged my hand, throwing probably the ugliest overhand right you've ever seen in your life. Looked like Asterix and Obelix. Remember that little cartoon? And that injury led me to pursue, larger glove combat sports, and I went over to the ring gym, Andy Hollywood Colgrave. He was really good back in the day, still is. And had started off, had a few fights on Roots. I've had fights over in Thailand, and then slipped into the coaching role, which I love.
Cool.
That's a nice spot.
Like we said before we started recording, we like organic here. That's the product that we're putting out.
Yeah, well, we're also running an OnlyFans if people are interested. I'm just going to march all these nice butts past me, and you can send me your hard-earned.
I'll drop the link in the description because personally I'm sold. I'm sure the listeners will be the same.
Good.
So was going to ask, and you kind of covered it there. Your background coming out from New Zealand was with some of those sort of foundation kickboxing Muay Thai schools. But your initial kind of foray into competitive combat sports was MMA. Bones MMA gym. So it was just a busted hand and a desire to fight in bigger gloves that kind of led you down the Muay Thai route, or was there always kind of a separate sort of interest there?
Yeah, well, like I was always interested in it, but I think my number one, passion, certainly at that time, was MMA. Like I was investing a lot of time and training into being competitive in professional MMA, and I had all the supports around me. But Cal Potter, very close friend of mine, he was looking for something else in terms of advancing his striking, and he went to Andrew Colgrave, who had just opened his gym at that time, the Ring Gym in Braybrook, and he had been he'd come previously from Resilience and then from Dominance, sit your tongue product from back in the day with Jeb.
Yep.
And got to know Andy and really enjoyed being around him. His gym's got a fantastic culture, and his knowledge of Muay Thai I felt was complementary, and his style of Muay Thai was complementary both to obviously a Muay Thai sense, but it also carried over quite nicely to MMA. He fights with quite a wide base. He's a Famir fighter, and I felt that it carried over to MMA.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I got to know Andy and know his gym and appreciate his teaching styles, I just kind of started to move over that way, and then found myself on a roots card to begin with.
Yeah, awesome. And on like the coaching side of things, are you focused primarily on coaching people in their striking and their Muay Thai? Like, what's the arrangement like at Bones, and where do you fit in coaching the competitive team?
Yeah, so we're in a really small town here, but I'm blessed to have a lot of really high level specialist coaches. I think it's part of, it's a surf town, so a lot of people move down for lifestyle, and I've just been very lucky that a lot of those people have moved down are really high caliber coaches. So I've got specialist wrestling coaches, specialist jiu-jitsu coaches, and I for both sides of things, both the MMA fight team and the Muay Thai, I assume more of a kind of a head coach type role. So I'll be the lead corner. I hold pads for both. It's sometimes I'll feel like my energy will shift more to one side of things, and then it will kind of sway back. It's not my attention. I've always got the attention for both. I just kind of put my energy where I feel it needs to be at the time and spend more time there. But I'm very fortunate to be able to rely on the coaches to keep the balance across the board.
Yeah, nice. And what kind of size competitive team do you have there, and how are they split across the two sports, or more than that even?
Man, it's pretty crazy. Like we've got, I think at the moment we've got 8 professional fighters. Some more active than others. Because we've only been around 3 years, a lot of those people have come from other gyms or have come to us as amateurs and are now progressing into the professional ranks. But it's a pretty even split. But below those kind of professional ranks, we've got a lot of amateur guys and girls who are homegrown. And I'm really excited about the next wave. The people who, particularly on the Muay Thai side of things, the young people who have kind of come through and started with us, got their start with us, and are now starting to fight on Muay Vic, because what they are then representative of is our system. They've developed their style here. I'm really excited to see that those guys and girls start progressing and see where we can take that.
And how do you find as a trainer, you know, I guess you've kind of touched on it there, but how does it differ for you building someone from the ground up versus, because you mentioned a lot of people move to Torquay kind of like for lifestyle, right? So are you finding that a lot of people they've trained, maybe they were from Melbourne or wherever they've come in from, they trained there and they've kind of found your gym as, I've moved to Torquay and I want to continue my training? Is that where the majority of the people, is that kind of a common situation for people coming into you?
Yeah, like there's a bit of that, and then there's you know, some people who are already living in the area but were having to travel further abroad for their training.
Yeah,
and we opened up, it was like a kind of a marriage of convenience, but I guess they've stayed for the training. I think I've been quite comfortable, you know, working with people who've had like 5 or 6 professional fights coming here and kind of exploring and what I can offer them in terms of whether it be you know, additional knowledge or you know, maybe refreshing their training, taking a new direction, reigniting their love for it. And I think we've had quite a lot of success in doing that. And then the homegrown guys, I really enjoy starting from scratch and teaching them, rather than affording them techniques, creating and nurturing an understanding of, you know, for instance, what Muay Thai is, and encouraging them to watch, you know, stadium Muay Thai and sit down with them, understand the scoring, and kind of, you know, foster their development from like a root level understanding of what the sport is, rather than teaching them how to kick and punch. And yes, we're starting to see the product of that now. Some, you know, I'm sparring last night with a 15-year-old guy. He's really lanky. He's having his first fight on Muay Vic next weekend, and I'm having a lot of trouble with him, and that's really exciting. You know, a guy who was homegrown here, he's never had a fight, and I'm having difficulty with him after just 3 years of training. Is pretty cool and rewarding as a coach.
There's something equal parts rewarding and depressing about building someone up to the point where they can beat the shit out of you.
Yeah, I had to start coming to terms with that. Like, you're still fit and healthy. I'm fat and old, and you know, I can't rely on athleticism anymore. So yeah, I had to come to terms with that a little while ago.
I'm also always interested because I know some gyms, you know, I think every trainer will experience at some stage. Some gyms, it happens a lot based on their location or whatever it may be, is guys that have that bit of foundation coming in. So you talk there about like that process of building someone up from being homegrown. What's the learning been like for you as a trainer in that difference? Because to me, like, I've never been a trainer as such, but I've had a hand in kind of helping out. And personally, I find it much easier to build someone up from like their very first day than to take someone who already has some degree of foundation, because there's that potential conflict in styles and they've learned it one way, and can you assimilate it? I'm interested in your thoughts on what it's been like kind of learning to work with people that come to you already with, you know, maybe already with a couple of fights or with some foundation.
Yeah. You know, like my background in outside of martial arts is largely built around, you know, building human capacity. So working with either groups or individuals to help create an understanding of who they are and, you know, where they want to go, particularly with, you know, teenagers who are kind of on the fringes of the justice system and involved in police stuff. So I find, like, as a starting point, to create a relationship with someone who's just come here, who previously had another coach, like working on that relationship and building kind of a foundation of mutual trust is a good way to start. And just get going on the pads. So to develop almost a symbiotic relationship on the pads, develop and get to a point where we can flow, and then bringing in the learning incrementally. So rather than just coming and going, you know, day one, this is all the stuff we're going to scratch out. this is how much stuff I know that's better than your old coach, which usually isn't. It usually isn't the case. We just bring it in incrementally, and that's been successful to that point. But some relationships are probably more delicate than others. It's just got to do it on an individual basis, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. And then do you find like there's a certain way to nurture that, develop that relationship with someone with some experience to make sure they become an asset to the newer guys, like so they bring in something new?
Yeah, I think so. In a group setting, I think it's good to acknowledge, a newcomer's experience and, to seek their opinion in class. Often our classes they might not follow the kind of the usual template of running a class. I try and get a lot of discussion going. I ask a lot of questions during class, whether they are to be thought-provoking or generally because I'm interested in how people might interpret who have a different style than me. And to have the benefit of people with experience in the room really adds value to that conversation. And then you've got newer guys and girls who are party to that, and they're listening and they're hanging on every word. I'm in a position where I didn't have a ton of fights, so I'm often coaching people who have had more fights than me. So to that extent, it's great to be able to ask tap into their experience in a group setting.
Yeah, I think that's like a really cool like level of coaching humility that's being like, I believe that coaching and fighting are two very different skills. And that's why, like, more fights does not equal better trainer. I think that's pretty fair to say. A lot of people that were successful in having a lot of fights go on to be pretty average trainers, and the same works in reverse, right? But it's like, as you say, like there's that art to learning to kind of govern the training process while still being able to learn from the in-ring experience of the guys that are on your team.
Yeah, absolutely.
And being like, I'm always interested in like, because, I train at, a real kind of like Muay Thai gym. We've had a lot of Thai trainers through, and that background is very much, kind of comes from Thailand. I'm always interested in gyms that have that mix. We've got like an active team of Muay Thai fighters in an MMA gym. Do you find you've got a lot of guys that are kind of dipping their toes in the individual arts such as Muay Thai en route to getting into MMA, or is it fairly kind of segmented?
At first, I'm happy to put my hand up and say that I probably made the mistake of encouraging too much kind of mixing of the two elements. Fairly recently, an environmental change of moving two gyms into one kind of brought everyone into the same space. And what I tended to find was, the MMA guys would turn up to Muay Thai sparring and vice versa. And it wasn't conducive with developing, the Muay Thai rhythm or a Muay Thai cadence. And then I'd find that the Muay Thai crew were going over to the MMA sparring, and they were getting frustrated because they weren't able to kind of rely on their timing and they're two different sports. So there's far more of a clear delineation now as to MMA and Muay Thai. That's not to say that there's knowledge that and learnings to be shared between them. There's been times recently where I've got an MMA guy that I'm working on who likes to spend time in the clinch, dirty boxing, throwing knees, and I'm like, you know what? Start coming down to, like, we do a lot of clinching here, probably more so than most gyms, and I've encouraged him to come down to our Thursday clinch sessions to develop his understanding of offsetting balance and developing trips and things like that, and that's really accented his game. But to a large extent, I try and keep those two areas separate.
Yeah, because do you find it's just like also with, I think for me, like my original background in martial arts was a little bit more of that kind of kickboxing, MMA, like not that sort of authentic kind of Muay Thai. And I probably, when I was younger, like much younger in the sport, I didn't know a lot about real like Thailand Muay Thai, I kind of had that, I didn't really fully understand the difference between kickboxing and Muay Thai, to be honest. And I probably just thought of like striking as a much more broad term that could sort of encompass all. Do you think that's just that's kind of a mentality maybe some gyms have, or maybe like MMA guys sort of just kind of, I suppose, like, because we see this a bit in New South Wales, especially at our lower level, kind of development day, like the equivalent of Muay Victoria. The MMA guys sort of get their guys in to get a little bit of striking experience, but they really are not, they want them to have a stand-up match, but they're not exploring kind of the nuance and stuff that lets that happen. So when it comes into the clinch and stuff like that, they're quite ill-equipped. Do you think that's kind of a mistake people make? Was that something you kind of had to learn on the fly? Was that those kind of intricate differences between the two?
No, I don't think so. Not for me. I've been a consumer of Muay Thai for quite a while now. So I watch it. I watch a lot of Muay Thai. I think it's one of the one of the more underrated aspects of understanding Muay Thai as it's so accessible now, as to watch it and to ask questions about it, and just to consume it at every opportunity. So I've been acutely aware of the differences, and I don't think I've made that mistake. Look, at our gym, while we share the same space, so the MMA guys are upstairs, the Muay Thai crew are downstairs. It's the Muay Thai aspect of the gym is very true to the cultural consideration. So it was blessed by a Thai monk. I speak as much Thai as I can in class, not to be a dick, but to foster understanding of the techniques, and just to try and impart some of the culture and the understanding that sits beneath them. So like why we would throw a strike, why it would be appreciated in Thailand over a different kind of strike. So I think we're very true to the as much as we can be without appropriating it, the Thai part of the culture and our Muay Thai classes. Yeah,
and that does bring me to something I was keen to get stuck into, because you are very aware of like a really authentic, like you've got a very rich knowledge of Muay Thai tradition. Is that just from self-study? Like, do you have a particular kind of mentor in that side of things?
You know what? At the moment, I'm learning. I've recently started learning to speak Thai with
Cool.
Kru Chom, and she's a brilliant teacher. If you're not aware of her, jump onto her. Thai by Chom is her Instagram handle, and she's a former fighter herself. Her English is excellent. She's a teacher. She's a current mentor of mine in terms of a source of information that I can go to go, what, I was listening to some commentators the other day at this, at Rank Sit, and this is what they were saying. What are they getting to with that? I don't quite understand. She's able to broaden my understanding of it there. I watch other trainers and I ask questions. I'm not afraid to, go to kind of more experienced trainers or send them a message. Go, hey, what do you think about this? What am I missing here? And then consuming as much as I can on. There's just so much available on the internet now to gain this information. So in the past, my mentor has absolutely been Andrew Colgrave. He understands a lot. He spent a long time fighting in Thailand and Cambodia. So he's fantastic. If I'm ringside at the fights, just going up to Jeb and going, why was this scored this way? I don't understand. And will always put you in your place. He's quite happy to go to a bus. There's all these people around. You just need to ask questions to further your understanding.
I love that. That's something a lot of kind of the guests we've talked to, it's a theme I get onto a lot, is like, I think a lot of us, I say us because I'm definitely included sometimes. I think it's just a human thing, need to kind of ditch our stubbornness and just really be, I don't know, like acknowledge the things that we don't know, right? Like I spend a lot of time up here in New South Wales. The person I annoy more than anyone else is probably Elias. Elias Delapsis, because he's so generous with his time and his knowledge. But like, when he told me I could ask him a question anytime, I don't think he knew what he was signing up for.
It's like Ask Jeeves.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to that guy anyway? Yeah.
Got swallowed by Google.
Yeah.
But that kind of brings me to sort of the point that I was really keen to unpack. So talking about your kind of traditional knowledge and understanding, and one of the ways that I got a feel for everything that you know is your commentary work on Rebellion. So a few shows in a row now, I think you've been sort of been a feature of the Rebellion commentary booth. Obviously, there's only been a few shows over a couple of years for reasons we're bored of getting into. But how did that come together? How did you end up getting the call up to do the commentary?
Yeah, so I haven't been around for a long time in commentary. It's I think I've done 4 Rebellions now and a handful of routes.
Yeah.
I used to have a podcast called Naughty Boy Fight Picks, and what we'd do is we'd go in and make assumptions and predictions of UFC fights and talk shit. And I became quite comfortable, talking shit on camera and to an audience. And so I became aware of that at some stage. Now I was really looking forward to one of the Roots cards at Melbourne Town Hall, because I didn't have any fighters on. I was like, man, how good is this? I've actually got a Saturday night off. I'm going to go to this.
Fan.
Yeah, I'm going to go be a fan. And I got so pumped up for it that me and my brother went to a bar in Footscray to have some kind of pre-drinks before we got there. And it was a really hot day and we ended up getting pretty hammered. Which isn't, I'm not a massive drinker. And by the time we rocked up to the show, we're real pissed. Like I was slurring my words. And we walked in through the front door and Sai goes, Matt, I need you to commentate. And I was like, get me the biggest bottle of water that you can find. So it wasn't planned. It was ad hoc. And I think maybe that was a good thing that I turned up kind of half cut, because it kind of alleviated the, any kind of anxiety or apprehension I had around about being there. And I was with, Donnie Miller, who's, he's just easy to talk shit with, and just had heaps of fun. And afterwards I was, and it got received pretty well. And, afterwards I had a chat to Si. I was like, man, that was fun, dude. Let's do that again. So it very much happened by accident. And, the more I get into it, the more I take it seriously and look to kind of look into the narrative of each fight and to understand each fight and what it means for each fighter and the context of, where they're at in their career. It's just kind of fostered this new love for fight shows. And man, it's the best seat in the house.
Absolutely. And like we were talking about before we kicked off, like I've been doing a little bit of commentary up here, and I've been lucky because like I don't pretend to be a good commentator. It's something I would really like to practice enough to get good at. And I've been really lucky, more than anyone. Andrew Parnham has kind of like given me the platform to learn, and I'm always really grateful for that, because as a promoter, like, you're really putting your show, your live stream in the hands of someone who, in my case, has no idea what they're doing. And especially like, I got to commentate Yolanda versus Diandra the other month. And that was a fight that I was genuinely like really, really excited for, as in like when those two walked out, like my heart was beating really fast. Like I was like I would have been going nuts if I was in the crowd for that. And to get that experience of like being able to commentate that, and a lot of people are excited for it, and like you're the person that they're gonna, especially I was solo on the commentary, so it's like they don't get a break from me for 5 seconds. But I'm interested to hear, after you got that kind of ad hoc opportunity to go and do it, is this something that you've done anything in particular to kind of upskill in, or you find it just sort of comes naturally? Have you put a process behind getting better, or it's just kind of take it as it comes?
What comes naturally to me is talking in front of an audience. So, whether it be in a forum such as a gym. Prior to this, I used to do a lot of talks at high schools and in prisons and residential care homes. I did a lot of talking about violence, capacity building, motivational speaking. So that part of it is natural to me. I didn't find the transition to talking about a fight in a live sense natural. It's something that I spent time practicing, looking at. I love American sports like college sports and NFL, and taking note of how they add color to what's happening on the TV, and how much time they spend talking about, an individual player, how much time they talk about the score, how much time they talk about, the general feeling and the senses that are attributed to that experience for those who aren't there in person to experience it, and trying to add that. And then listening to what my co-commentators are saying, because I've had the privilege now of being on the mic twice with Hammer, Hammer Castanini, and man, I spoke about watching how accessible fight sports was in New Zealand in like the 90s. When I was like still shitting my pants, Hammer was commentating some of those fights. His voice is very familiar to me. So when I was sitting next to him, it's a pretty almost like a. And I'm not the type to be awed in any way, but it was like, man, this is fucking cool. Like I'm sitting here, like I used to listen to this guy, and here I am. So, after the commentary, asking him questions, and that's been really cool for me as well in terms of my development, I guess.
Well, I think Hammer is such a great broadcast partner because he's been around fight sports for so long, like firsthand, but has also done so much commentary. So he's got that incredible amount of blended experience. Like, you can commentate with a great fighter and they can not necessarily be a great commentator, or you can commentate with someone that really knows the broadcast side of things but doesn't really get the sport, and that neither of those two people are going to kind of teach you a lot about building that commentating cadence, because there's just like, it's very difficult to find a person that has that balance of like broadcast ready experience versus actual color experience.
I think it's rhythm, right? Like just like how Muay Thai is about rhythm and offsetting rhythm and breaking rhythm, and but to do that, having first have an understand of the cadence of what's happening. There's I love doing it with Hammer because I get it. I feel the rhythm. I get the cadence. I know when it's my turn. I know when I shut up, and it's really fun when that happens. That's when you can start to joke and or even to read more deeply into what's going on, because you're not needing to fight to keep it going and to keep its momentum, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. My last couple of commentary gigs have been solo, because I go and I do Andrew's show, and it's very much the last couple have been quite grassroots. Like they run through a novice show into an amateur show, and they'll finish with some pros at the top. But like just the length and they're usually at the gym. So it's just got that very casual, just one person on the mic. But that's a challenge in and of itself, because you don't have that pacing help. And like I did one show, I did a Yakao show, which was really, really difficult for a couple of reasons. Like we were called in at the last minute and we didn't have any headsets, so we couldn't hear each other. Like it was actually a bit of a nightmare. But that one, there was always someone else in the booth who was the commentator, and that made it difficult too, because like you say, when you're the color commentator, I suppose, like I think the most important thing to understand is when to shut up. Like whether it's we've got to talk about a sponsor maybe, or we've got to talk about, something about play, like just to control that rhythm. I think as a fighter or a coach, when you're looking at the ring and you're trying to analyze what's happened, it's moving a million miles an hour, and you can just kind of word vomit. that it's like learning that cadence of like, say something, less is more, kind of like, you know, did you find kind of similar things?
Yeah, man, totally. I've only there was a time on one of the route shows, I think it was at Collingwood Town Hall, where I think I was with Andrew Parnham, and he had a fighter on, and there was no cover, so I found myself having to commentate like 3 fights by myself, and man, I hadn't done it to that point. And I listened back to it, and like at one stage I was talking about like ladies of the night or something. I'm like, man, I should never be left alone. Like leaving a kid alone with like a lighter. And it's like I had Paris in my ear just going, dude, what are you talking about? And so, yeah, it is definitely tricky to do it by yourself. And yeah, I only want to say, I don't want to talk for the sake of talking. I think that's kind of, the point that you're getting. People don't want to hear the dribble. They want to have what's happening on the screen accented and made better, and to get a sense of what they can't when they're not there. Or you know, if they're watching it at home, to feel like they're having a, you know, some kind of dialogue with the person that's on the mic, I think. So not to add any extra fluff. I mean, that's going to take me a while to get used to, but I certainly plan on getting better. I'm commentating BOA, which is size jiu-jitsu tournament in a couple of weeks, which will be a new challenge altogether. I'm really looking forward to that challenge, because the pace of, you know, submission grappling, especially if there's a gi involved, can be much slower and more intricate, and things aren't quite as obvious. And man, I don't know how much time you spend around jiu-jitsu gyms, but they're all fucking nerds. So it's like everyone, there's no one like sitting there at like a sports bar sinking beers watching it. Like they're all sitting at home, you know, with their notebooks and, you know, pajamas. So got to be on point.
Do you think that will change the cadence? Is that a thing you've got to consider as speaking to a different audience? Like maybe, and of course the pace is different, as you say. Do you think there is a little bit room to articulate more intricately in a jiu-jitsu match than a Muay Thai fight, for example?
Yeah, well, look, I think I certainly know more about Muay Thai than I do about jiu-jitsu. Like I've been doing jiu-jitsu for 8 years or something now, but you know, contemporary jiu-jitsu is like, sometimes I look at it and it's alien to me. So I think in some scenario like that, to spend more time, you know, examining the lineage of each fighter, and you know, because that stuff is, I find that really interesting personally. So I'd like to talk about it, like learning, where did this guy get his black belt from, and what does that mean in the context of this match? You know, how does the style of his lineage compare with the style of this other person's lineage? And man, like BOA's a spectacle. Like I went to one, man, it's been 2017, and it's really, really impressive. So, you know, to sell that to the people at home won't be hard, but it'll be something I'll spend time doing. Yeah.
Awesome. A man of many skills, jumping into the jiu-jitsu now, can commentate anything.
We'll see. So I'll start commentating your OnlyFans if you want. I just need a little cut. Just kick me back a little something.
I'll put that service in the description as well if you need commentated OnlyFans videos. So interested to hear also from the kind of the shows that you've done in the time you've been commentating, do any moments stick out as like you know, highlights, incredible moments to be there calling, and what was it like to kind of put your spin on those?
Yeah, man, like that, I reckon that like that first night where I was just kind of put in the seat, and then to be sitting there and for it to go live, that was a really cool moment for me. I was like, man, how cool is this? Like how interesting that my kind of foray with Muay Thai back when I first stepped into Andy Colgrave's gym has led to this moment in such a short period of time. I was like, that was a really cool moment for me, and you know, one that stood out on a brand such as Roots Rebellion, which, you know, it means a lot to me. I really appreciate what Sai does with that, and I've developed a lot of relationships around it. So it's not something that I I really took it seriously and accepted that responsibility as something of importance, and so it means something to me. So that was really cool. The lockdown show was that I commentated with Tim. The Roots lockdown show was both important and in the context of what was going on. I think there was a general sense of it as meaning something more than just being a Muay Thai show. Tim McCauley, who is just a legend, came over to have a chat to me and Tim just before we went live, and he's like, he's so cool. He's like, let's really give this everything. There's no crowd here. Let's really push hard tonight, boys. And I was like, fuck yeah, let's go. And that was really cool. But it was also, that show stands out because it had no crowd and we were ringside. That was it was confronting and difficult, and there was a lot of sponsors that we had to get through. It played a part. So I felt like me and Tim accomplished something that was quite challenging on it. That really stands out. The 8-man tournament, at St Kilda Town Hall was really cool. I did that was my first Rebellion. I did that with it changed through a bit, but Andy Parnham was there when he wasn't cornering. Pinky, Chris Bradford was there for a bit. Alexi, it was just really cool. And the caliber of the fights was unreal.
Massive night that was.
It was awesome. And the St Kilda Town Hall it's got this. It's not a big venue, but the acoustics of the place gives it a theatre. I think it was Corey Barrett fought on that show. I can't remember who he fought now, but the Beast crowd. So when Beast come, they're very vocal, and I can remember kind of turning around, and just behind me, behind the barricade, they were like screaming and sweating, and I was like, man, this is awesome. Like, you feel everything kind of feels smooshed in and together. It was that really stands out too.
Yeah, and do moments like that make that crowdless show, given it was kind of like hopefully it was a one-off, right? Does that kind of affect the atmosphere? Like, were you having to find yourself doing things differently because there was no crowd? Did it feel different? What was that like? That kind of transition like?
Yeah, it was. There was no energy to feed off. So once the fighters got in there, it was just our voices and the voices of the corner. So I had to fight through the uncomfortability of the fighters hearing what I was saying, especially those with whom
that would be hard.
Yeah, especially with those whom that I had a relationship, like being able to hear what I was saying and commentate live. That was uncomfortable for me. And like, after the first time, I'm like, man, I'm just going to say what I'm just going to try and do what I'm doing. And Tim was awesome. Like, we got a pretty natural kind of banter going on. And, but yeah, it was very difficult without the crowd there.
Yeah, I thought you guys were great that night. I liked him as well. He's I like what he's been doing with it does mostly like the kind of ring announcing stuff, but I think he speaks very well. So I agree, you guys were a good duo. We of course also were like well in the thick of our lockdown when that crowdless Rebellion show went on. So having that to kind of watch, it was a big event. Like, I remember a bunch of us across a couple of gyms watched that. Like, I was watching it to screen because we all got on Zoom to watch the show. Talk a little bit in between fights and play it on the other side. So I thought the way that you guys put that together, look, because of course in that setting, like, commentary team's very important, because like, it's just, I mean, obviously we watch the fight, but they're fighting in like a silent kind of empty venue. Like, it really becomes a lot more like the commentary plays a more intimate sort of role, especially when everyone who's watching it is at their house by themselves, because it's not even like you can grab three mates and watch it together. So you are kind of like more than ever, I think that show, it felt like you were watching it with the commentators, and that's where I think like you guys' vibe worked really well, because you are both that sort of relaxed, kind of casual, almost commentary style. It was not like, I don't even know how to describe it. It wasn't that like kind of peppy and robotic sort of media style of commentary. It was a little bit more dialed back, like, let's just enjoy this fight together.
Yeah, I think so too, man. Because Hammer was there, he was cornering River Daz, and he had his Warriors Way lockdown event. A couple of months later, I noticed that he put Sai and the other commentators right at the back of the room, away from the ring. I was like, good move.
Good call.
Good call. Do you know what's really strange about, and it's something that you wouldn't have been able to really pick up through the cameras, and you just don't have crowdless Muay Thai shows where people are smashing each other, and the sounds. I can still remember the sounds. It's something that you just don't hear. Is the violence of Muay Thai, like unbridled violence without the kind of environmental noise of the crowd and stuff. Yeah. And man, you just like, I used to do this shit. Like, this is crazy. Yeah. Like, you hear, like, when someone checks, you hear the bone on the bone. There was some really good little exchanges with elbows, and you hear like the not even like a thud, like the clunk of an elbow. And I was like, man, this sport's sick. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. So it was a privilege to be party to that and hear it without the crowd noise too. It's pretty rare.
That was something that was very interesting to me about the One Championship crowdless shows in the early going, because like what was cool about those shows to me was like, One Championship often doesn't match their top ties with their top ties, but when you close all the borders, they didn't have a choice. So you actually got some like quite high quality matches out of it. But it was just listening to with no crowd, how noisy the Thai fighters are. Like the way that, because you notice it when you're in the gym with them, when you go there to train, they kind of audibly manage their breathing and keep a rhythm. Like it's almost like they're singing a little song with and then like you watch this fight. I think one that sticks out, I think it was did Sokra fight Pongsari? I think that might have been the match. And these two were so noisy. Yeah. Like and you don't even realize that like that's what the inside of that cage of that ring sounds like all the time. Like if you're a referee, you would hear it. But like it was like kind of a new piece of insight to outsiders watching, is some of the sounds that go on in the ring.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? Because like that's what play sparring should sound like. Bang! I landed that kick without having to land it with lots, or that knee with lots of force. And, that's at the highest level that that relaxed, not without compression, but that relaxed nature of sparring and that playfulness can carry over, but just be kind of dialed up in terms of the violence and the intensity. Whereas there was some fights on that card, and I could hear people holding their breath, which was really interesting. At the lower levels, I could hear and like the. When people threw a kick, I could hear how tight their bodies were. It was really interesting. And from a coaching perspective, to be able, to step back and be like, I'm a coach, and this is like, without all the noise, I can hear what it means and sounds like to be tight and tense. And like one of your first couple of fights, it was interesting.
And that was a question I was keen to touch on as well, given that you've had your competitive experience, you're playing a coaching role now. Do you think commentating and getting that angle of the sport as a whole has kind of helped you with your coaching? Like, have you sort of picked up any new perspective, or do you really feel that they're kind of entirely separate?
I don't think it. I don't think it would have changed a huge amount in terms of how I go about coaching, but what it has been really valuable for is understanding the landscape of Muay Thai in Australia. So I do a lot of research before I commentate now, especially.
I think that's something you do very well. Like I was, because it's something I've tried to put together too. Like I think people ask me to commentate shows because they know I have a pretty good grasp of who everyone is. But like, you know, because I've had you commentate me once now, I was very impressed with kind of the questions that you sent through, not just for the questions that you asked, but the questions you were asking had background knowledge involved. Like it's not like, what's your favorite technique and, you know, what's your best part about fighting? Like you're asking me questions about, I know you moved from your old gym to Sitchathon. What's that been like? Because it's like, it's one thing to ask a question, but it's another to ask an actual kind of telling question based on something you know.
Yeah, well, I guess it's just aligned with my interest, right? Like what interests me, one of the things that interests me just about fighting is, you know, the narrative of each combatant's journey. Like what fighting is such like a journey in exploring, you know, your own morality and like kind of finding out who you are. Like that stuff interests me personally.
Yeah.
I find it interesting, and to learn more about a fighter's you know, coach or their gym or their style and what it means in the context of their story as a fighter. That stuff interests me. So yeah, I think it's easy for me to then go down that path to find out more. And
Yeah.
you know, through doing that on a bunch of shows now, and about even for guys who are just coming up who have had like 2 or 3 fights on routes, the lay of the land is kind of spread out for me now. I'm like, I get it. Like this is the nuance between a fighter from dominance. Like I know that if the fighters come out from dominance, they're going to be favoring the body kick and the switch kick, and they don't mind. You know, they don't mind to move back and hit with a switch kick, and you know, you probably see more long guard out of them as opposed to, you know, another gym like Braveheart who are going to have a more aggressive, come forward, Muay Mutt style. Like that's good for me as a coach.
Yeah, perfect. And I think that I definitely, as a fan of the work that you've been doing, I think that comes across, and I think it's something that I'd love to see a little bit more of in Muay Thai commentary, because it adds to the storytelling element. And something I was talking about in one of the episodes a couple of weeks ago was how we grow the sport is we change. Like a lot of the time when people are watching a fight, they're watching to see a person. They're not necessarily a fan of the sport. So they might be casually interested. But where we elevate that casual interest is we take a fight and we change it from being fighter A versus fighter B to give that reason for investment and tell the stories because a fight's a fight. I've seen thousands of them. You've seen thousands of them. What's gripping me to that? You know, we've obviously our fascination is the sport. That's not how we build a fan base, right? We build a fan base in people who are casually interested. So how do we tell a little bit of a story that A, cultivates interest, but B, helps people get that little bit more educated? Like you say, this is what you can expect from the dominance fighters because they train with so-and-so. And then when someone sits down to watch another show, oh, he's fighting out of this gym. Last time the commentator said, we can expect this and this, and add that context. So I've been really enjoying the way that you turn a fight into a story. Like I'm a huge fan of listening to you commentate.
Oh, thank you, man. That's awesome, bro. That's awesome. I was sitting down the other day with my wife. She's you know, she's still fighting, and
G5,
you know, yeah, massive fight fan, and we're watching the UFC countdown show for the Cyril Gain versus Ngannou. And I was sitting there, I was watching the countdown. I was like, man, no one does it better than these guys, not because of the production value, but because they get that. They get how to sell a narrative. And and they've converted a bloodthirsty, dumb kind of fan base, and they're educating them, but the grab is the story. Like that's what gets them. They're interested in what it means in the context. Rather than how the fight metrics, the data kind of interact. They're not interested in that. And I think that's just something that's is very primal, and you know, it can be found in it's found in like all old stories. It's kind of like the good versus evil, and you know, the heel and the hero, and that's what human beings. That's what interests us is a good story.
Absolutely. And just like kind of as we approach time here, another one that I was really speaking of that storytelling, and is there any particular fighters or any, again, hopefully we're getting back to a busy year this year. Any particular fighters or upcoming matches you'd like to see? Anything that you feel is kind of in the pipeline for Oz Muay Thai or any combat sport in Oz, really, that you're really looking forward to?
Yeah, man. I get really excited for Carter Lawrence. I've spoken about this. I'm a little bit of a fanboy. I like that style. I like kicking styles, and I enjoy what I saw from him in his last fight versus Darren. And I thought
that was an amazing fight. That was a really, really good fight.
Yeah, and I like the I like what he had brought over from FA Group. I really enjoy clinching. So whenever I see good high level clinching, and those two will certainly put it on, I enjoy that. Man, it's not even on like the top tier level, but the last Muay Vic, something that gets me really excited is seeing really good up and comers fight and see how they progress. Like, I know that's not super consumable in terms of like mainstream Muay Thai, but I'm really excited in 2 weeks' time to see how these guys are progressing. There was some real standout. There was a kid from Eight Blades boy in Dom's gym who fought last time. I'm excited to see him fight. Donnie Miller's got some really good up and comers. That gets me excited. I like to see that, and it's scary. Do you know what's scary? Like, man, some of these kids who are coming up who are like 14, 15, who have grown up with the resources of all this knowledge that's available, and the better understanding and better development pathways in Australia are going to be so good, man. And I'm excited to be part of that journey, like from grassroots right up to the top level. That gets me excited,
Yeah, and I think like a sort of more structured amateur development program in Victoria in particular, because the kind of pathway system at that early into experienced professional level is already so good down there that adding that grassroots layer is going to be absolutely huge. Like, I think there's going to be some serious talent of the next generation of pros pumping out of Victoria. I think that's a really exciting idea.
Hell yeah. And it just quickly on some of the kind of up and coming fighters that I'm really keen to see at like a pro level, like the Martin sisters get me excited. Pretty much. Like, man, I busted Karen shoplifting at Culture Kings before Rebellion the other day.
He's been known to do that.
Let's not let detract from what he's doing over at Moyu. I'm really excited to see.
He's banned from Canberra and Sydney Culture King, so when he gets down to Melbourne, he sort of has to go and have a run.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and so I'm excited to see them. Yeah, man, just Muay Thai's awesome.
It is awesome. That's the whole point of the show at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Really appreciate your time. Like I've said this to you in this episode, but I've said it about you in other episodes as well. I'm a massive fan of what you're doing. As a wannabe commentator, I'm super inspired. I like to hear other people doing it well, so I can try to copy a little bit. It's like fighting, right? Like, just take some little tricks and try to make it yours. And that 10-year anniversary kind of promo piece that you did was like, I've watched it heaps of times. Like, I went out at the show and just stood in the crowd, like, just to watch it. And like, I seriously think that's one of the best pieces of, like, I don't even know if you'd call it promotional work. Like, it was a work of art. Like, I absolutely thought that was unreal, and I'm excited to keep seeing you as a fixture of the commentary booth at Australian Muay Thai shows.
Oh, thank you, man. That means a ton. I really appreciate those kind words. That was a privilege to do the 10-year anniversary, which is why I put so much into it. And if I can be a fixture of that show, or whatever capacity I'm in, I'm just really excited for what the future holds in that regard, man. So hopefully we get to call together one day. So if you're listening, the bro Hugh. He's
Let's
not
do
busy
it.
kicking and punching people's legs off. Bring him down.
That's a collaboration that we want. Where can people find you? What's your kind of preferred social media platform to sort of follow the journey?
I'm encouraged regularly to actively post on our Instagram, which is Bones MMA. We're in Torquay. I don't have a personal channel or anything these days. I'm trying to minimize those distractions, but please follow our gym. We've got heaps going on. We're about to launch the Wimps to Warrior program down here, which I'm super excited about. Looking to get involved in some youth development stuff with IMAF, and yeah, heaps going on, man. Find us in Torquay. Come down for a surf and a hiding.
There you go. Can't ask for much more than that.
Sweet. Hugh, thanks very much, bro. Hey, all the best, man. Looking forward to seeing you back in there.
Thank you. Looking forward to seeing you down in Melbourne soon, I hope.
Sounds good, bro.
Beauty. To everyone else, thank you very much for listening. As always, do us a solid by liking, sharing, subscribing. If you enjoyed the episode, tell your mates. That's how we can keep doing it. Thank you, of course, to our sponsors, the legends at Warriors of the Moncon. They've got some fresh kit dropping, so hit up the website. Some awesome content on their Instagram as well. As we said, Muay Thai is cool, and we want to support the people that are backing Muay Thai. Hopefully, Shane and I are both back next week, because I'm sure everyone is sick of me, but the guest quality's been pretty good. Until then, take care. Talk soon.